The Galactic Concord had existed for 12,000 years. It was a union of 900 different alien species who had agreed to live in peace with each other. They traded goods, shared knowledge, and followed strict rules that kept everyone safe. War was expensive and destructive, so they had learned to avoid it. In all those thousands of years, the Concord had only quarantined one species. They had drawn a line around their territory and told them never to cross it. That species was humanity. Ambassador Verthax was an old creature with soft gray skin and glowing tendrils that hung from his face like a beard. He belonged to the Kelthari, one of the founding species of the Concord. Today he stood in a great hall filled with representatives from across the galaxy. He was trying to explain something very important to the newest members. The Varaxi Dominion had just joined the Concord. They were an insect-like species, with hard shells, sharp mandibles, and wings that buzzed when they were angry. Their High Queen sat on a throne made of black metal, surrounded by her guards and advisors. She was twice the size of any other Varaxi in the room, and her compound eyes showed nothing but contempt for the smaller species around her. Verthax activated a holographic display that floated in the air between them. It showed images of a blue and green planet orbiting a yellow star. "This is Earth," he said, "the homeworld of humanity. They discovered faster-than-light travel about 300 of our cycles ago. They are a young species by our standards. Most of their biology is unremarkable. They have no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities." The High Queen clicked her mandibles together. It was the Varaxi way of laughing. "Why should we care about such weak creatures? We have conquered dozens of species stronger than that, because in their first 50 cycles of space travel, they fought 17 different wars with other species," Verthax replied, "and they won all of them." The chamber went quiet. Even the buzzing of Varaxi wings stopped. "The Marathi supremacy was the first to underestimate them," Verthax continued. He changed the holographic display to show a different species, tall beings with purple skin and 4 arms. The Marathi invaded human outer colonies without warning. They killed 80 million human civilians in the first month. Their military leaders expected humanity to surrender after such losses. "What happened?" one of the Varaxi generals asked. "The humans did not surrender. They became angry." Verthax paused to let that sink in. Within 2 years, they had rebuilt their fleet, developed new weapons, and launched a counterattack. The Marathi homeworld had a population of 2 billion. After the humans were finished, there were no survivors. They turned the entire surface into glass and ash. The High Queen leaned forward on her throne. Her eyes reflected the holographic images of destruction. "One victory against a weak enemy proves nothing." It was not one victory. Verthax brought up more images. Burning cities, shattered fleets, dead worlds. The Khazari Federation tried to enslave human colonists. The humans freed themselves and then hunted the Khazari across 3 star systems until none remained. The Thalian Empire attempted to blockade human trade routes. The humans broke through the blockade and destroyed every Tholian military installation in existence, turned off the display, and looked directly at the High Queen. "Humanity does not fight wars the way other species do. When they are attacked, they do not seek to defeat their enemy. They seek to destroy them completely. They will sacrifice anything, endure any hardship, continue fighting long after any rational species would have surrendered. They call this trait many things: determination, stubbornness, the will to survive. Call it insanity," the High Queen said. "Perhaps, but it is effective insanity." Verthax's tendrils dimmed, a sign of deep worry. "The Concord established the quarantine 200 cycles ago. We told the humans that they must stay within their territory. If they crossed the boundary, we would consider it an act of war against all 900 member species. They accepted these terms and have respected them ever since." The High Queen rose from her throne. She was an impressive figure, towering over everyone else in the room. Her wings spread wide, casting shadows across the floor. "You expect the Varaxi Dominion to fear these soft creatures?" she demanded. "We have built an empire that spans 40 star systems. We have a fleet of 10,000 warships. Our warriors are born to fight and die for the Dominion." "I expect you to be wise," Verthax replied calmly. The human quarantine zone contains several systems rich in valuable resources. I know your expansion plans require those resources, but I urge you to find alternatives. Do not provoke humanity. The Viraxi do not seek alternatives. We take what we need. The High Queen turned to her military advisors. How long would it take to conquer the nearest human colony? A general with scars across his shell stepped forward. The colony called New Montana sits just inside their border. Our scouts report minimal defenses. Perhaps 40,000 of our warriors could secure it within days. Excellent. The High Queen looked back at Vertex with what might have been a smile if insects could smile. Ambassador, you may tell your Concord that the Viraxi Dominion does not recognize your quarantine. Those systems belong to us now. If the humans object, they are welcome to try and stop us. Vertex's tendrils went completely dark. It was the Kelthari expression of absolute dread. High Queen, I must warn you one final time. The Concord will not help you if you do this. No species will come to your aid. You will face humanity alone. Warnings are for the weak, the High Queen replied. The Viraxi have never been weak. The meeting ended shortly after that. The Viraxi delegation left to prepare their invasion fleet while the other ambassadors watched in silence. Most of them had seen the records. Most of them knew what was coming. As Vertex walked back to his ship, a younger Kelthari diplomat caught up with him. Ambassador, should we not try harder to stop them? Perhaps if we showed them more evidence. Vertex shook his head slowly. They have made their choice. Some species must learn through suffering what they refuse to learn through wisdom. He stopped at the entrance to his ship and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the quarantine boundary, humanity was living in peace. They farmed their worlds, raised their children, and built their civilization. They did not want war, but war was coming to them anyway. Send a message to the Kelthari homeworld, Vertex told his aide. Tell them to prepare our archives for a new entry. Soon, the Viraxi Dominion will be nothing but a historical record, a warning for future generations about what happens when you ignore the signs. The young diplomat looked horrified. You truly believe the humans will destroy them? The entire Dominion? Vertex climbed aboard his ship without answering. Some questions did not need words. The answer would be written in fire and blood across the stars. And every species in the galaxy would learn to read it. The Viraxi had been warned. They had chosen not to listen. And now, nothing in the universe could save them from what came next. New Montana was a quiet world on the edge of human space. It had rust-colored soil, 2 small moons, and skies that turned purple at sunset. 400,000 people lived there. Most of them farmers and miners who had left the crowded cities of Earth to find a simpler life among the stars. Commander Kyle Bennett had been stationed on New Montana for 3 years. It was considered an easy assignment, far from any real danger. His job was to lead a small defense force of 12 patrol ships and 2 old frigates. He spent most of his days filling out paperwork and settling disputes between mining companies. On the morning, everything changed. Kyle was sitting in his office drinking coffee and reading reports about equipment repairs. The base was quiet. His officers were going about their normal routines. Nothing seemed wrong. Then the alarms started screaming. Kyle jumped up so fast he knocked his coffee across the desk. He ran down the corridor to the command center where his communications officer was already pulling up sensor data. Her name was Lisa Park, and she was one of the best officers he had ever worked with. But right now, her face was pale with shock. What do we have? Kyle demanded. 53 ships just dropped out of hyperspace, Lisa reported. Her voice was steady, but Kyle could see her hands shaking. They match Viraxi warship signatures. Military configuration. They have us completely surrounded. Kyle stared at the tactical display. The alien fleet hung in space like a cloud of angry insects. Each ship was covered in weapons that could destroy a city with a single shot. Against them, his little defense force was meaningless. Open a channel, he ordered. The main view screen flickered and showed the face of a Viraxi commander. The alien had dark red shells, massive mandibles, and compound eyes that reflected the lights of his own bridge. When he spoke, His translator turned the clicking sounds into harsh words. Human colony designated New Montana. I am Fleet Commander Crystal of the Varaxi Dominion. Your world now belongs to us. You will surrender immediately, or you will be destroyed. Kyle took a slow breath. He had trained for moments like this, though he never expected to actually face one. Fleet Commander, I need to inform you that this colony is under the protection of the United Earth government. Any attack on our people will be considered an act of war against all of humanity. Crystal made a sound that might have been in laughter. We are aware of your species. We are not afraid of you. You have 1 hour to surrender your colony and submit to processing. Processing? Kyle asked, though he was afraid he already knew the answer. Your people will be sorted. The useful ones will work in our mines. The rest will be disposed of. Crystal leaned closer to the screen. 1 hour human. Do not waste it. The transmission ended. Lisa looked at Kyle with wide eyes. Sir, what do we do? We cannot fight them. Our ships would be destroyed in minutes. I know. Kyle was already moving toward the emergency communications console. Get me a priority channel to Earth Command. Highest encryption we have. And start evacuation procedures for the civilian population. Evacuate to where? They have us surrounded. The mining tunnels. They go deep under the mountains. If the Varaxi want the resources on this planet, they will not destroy everything. Not at first. Kyle punched in his authorization codes. Get as many people underground as possible. Focus on the children first. While Lisa worked on the evacuation, Kyle composed his message to Earth. He kept it short and direct. He described the Varaxi fleet, their demands, and the timeline they had given. Then he added something personal at the end. Tell my sister I love her. And tell Command that New Montana will not surrender. We will fight until we cannot fight anymore. Make sure they remember us. Sent the message and watched it disappear into the depths of space. Then he turned to his small crew. Anyone who wants to leave, get to the tunnels now. No one will think less of you. He looked around the room at the young faces of his officers. Anyone who stays, stay because you choose to, not because you have to. No one moved. All right then. Kyle allowed himself a small smile. Let us give these bugs something to remember. The hour passed too quickly. When the deadline arrived, Kyle led his 12 patrol ships out to meet the Varaxi fleet. It was hopeless, and everyone knew it, but they flew anyway. They flew because running was not in their nature. They flew because surrendering meant watching their families be enslaved or killed. They flew because sometimes courage matters more than survival. Kyle's ship was destroyed in the first exchange of fire. A Varaxi plasma lance cut through his hull like it was paper, and he died before he could even give his final order. His crew died with him. All 12 patrol ships were gone within 10 minutes. On the ground, Lisa Park had managed to get 2,000 people into the mining tunnels before the Varaxi landing forces arrived. She organized the refugees, rationed their supplies, and tried to keep everyone calm. For 3 days they hid in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the invasion above them. On the 4th day, the Varaxi found them. Lisa was standing guard at the tunnel entrance when the first alien soldiers appeared. She raised her weapon and fired, knowing it was useless against their armored shells. She killed 2 of them before they cut her down. The last transmission from New Montana was sent by an automated system that Lisa had set up before she died. It broadcast on all frequencies, repeating the same word over and over again until the Varaxi finally destroyed the transmitter. Remember, remember. Across human space, the message was received. On 100 worlds and 1,000 cities, people heard that single word and understood what it meant. Their brothers and sisters on New Montana were gone. 400,000 innocent people killed by creatures who thought humanity was weak. On Earth, Admiral Patricia Cole stood in the command center of the United Earth Defense Force. She was 62 years old. With gray hair and eyes that had seen too many wars, around her, screens showed tactical data from New Montana. The death toll. The list of ships destroyed. The names of the fallen. Ma'am, her aide said quietly, The president is asking for recommendations. Patricia looked at the screens for a long moment. Then she spoke in a voice that carried across the entire room. Signal all fleet commands. We are going to war. She turned to face her officers. 200 years ago, the galaxy told us to stay in our corner and be quiet. We did what they asked. We respected their boundaries. We gave them no reason to fear us. Her eyes hardened. The Vroxy have reminded us why they should. Within hours, the largest military mobilization in human history had begun. Ships were recalled from patrol routes. Reserves were activated. Weapons that had been sealed away in deep vaults were brought out and made ready. And in the darkness between the stars, things that had been sleeping for 2 centuries began to wake up. The Vroxy had won their first battle. They had taken New Montana and killed everyone on it. They celebrated their victory and prepared to expand further into human territory. They had no idea that they had just signed their own death warrant. The Vroxy Dominion expected the humans to attack. They had prepared for it. Their military leaders studied human tactics, analyzed their weapons, and calculated their strength. By their best estimates, humanity could send perhaps 300 warships against them. The Vroxy had 10,000. The math was simple. They were wrong. For 200 years, humanity had lived behind the quarantine boundary. The galaxy had called them too dangerous to be allowed among civilized species. Rather than resent this judgment, humans had used the time wisely. They had built things in secret. They had developed technologies that no one else knew existed. They had prepared for the day when someone would be foolish enough to attack them. The first sign of trouble came. 3 weeks after New Montana fell. A Vroxy patrol squadron in the outer territories detected a strange ship on their sensors. It was small, barely larger than a transport shuttle, and it carried no identification markers. When the patrol moved to investigate, the ship simply disappeared. 2 hours later, the entire patrol squadron was gone. 5 warships carrying 3,000 Vroxy soldiers had vanished without a trace. There were no distress calls, no wreckage, no explanation. Fleet Commander Crixtal received the report and dismissed it as a sensor error. Then more ships started disappearing. Over the next 2 weeks, the Vroxy lost 47 vessels. Some vanished in deep space. Others went silent while stationed at supply depots or mining operations. When rescue teams arrived to investigate, they found nothing but empty space where their ships had been. Then the dying started. A mining station with 6,000 workers stopped responding to communications. A Vroxy cruiser was sent to check on them. When it arrived, the station appeared normal. The lights were on. The life support systems were running. But everyone inside was dead. There were no wounds on the bodies. No signs of violence or struggle. The workers were simply lying where they had fallen, frozen in the middle of whatever they had been doing when death found them. Some were at their workstations. Others were eating meals that had gone cold. A few were in their beds, as if they had simply stopped living in their sleep. The cruiser captain ordered his medical team to investigate. Within 6 hours, every member of that team was dead too. Panic began to spread through the Vroxy military. Soldiers refused to board stations that had gone silent. Crews demanded to know what was killing their people. The High Queen ordered her scientists to find answers. They had none to give. Meanwhile, on the edge of human space, the 7th Fleet sat motionless. 120 human warships, clearly visible on every Vroxy sensor and range. They made no attempt to hide. They simply waited. The Vroxy assumed this was the main human force. They positioned their own fleets to watch them, ready to intercept any attack. They were so focused on the obvious threat that they never noticed the real one. Captain Daniel Hayes commanded a ship called the Silent Hand. It was painted in colors that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. From more than a few kilometers away, it was completely invisible. From inside, Daniel could see the stars. But the stars could not see him. His crew of 40 specialists had trained for years for this kind of mission. They were ghosts, taught to strike without warning and vanish without trace. Each of them had volunteered knowing they might never be recognized for their service. The war they fought would never appear in history books. Target acquired, his sensor officer reported. Varaxi Carrier Group. 12 ships. Approximately 40,000 enemy personnel. Daniel studied the holographic display floating in front of his command chair. The Varaxi ships hung in formation around a massive carrier, unaware that death was watching them from the darkness. "Launch the package," he ordered. A small probe, no bigger than a human fist, drifted away from the silent hand. It carried no explosives, no missiles, no weapons that the Varaxi would recognize. Inside it was a carefully designed biological agent, a microscopic killer engineered specifically for Varaxi. Physiology. The probe floated into the carrier's sensor shadow and released its payload into space. The agent was invisible, odorless, and completely undetectable. It would be drawn into the ship's ventilation systems within hours. Daniel watched the Varaxi fleet continue on its course. The crews aboard those ships were already dead. They just did not know it yet. "Message to command," he said quietly. Package delivered. Moving to secondary targets, across Varaxi space, similar attacks were happening. Ghost ships struck supply convoys, military bases, and troop transports. Some used biological weapons. Others deployed nanoscale machines that disassembled ships from the inside out, turning metal and circuitry into useless dust. A few used weapons that no human had ever spoken about. Things developed in secret laboratories and tested in places where no one could ask questions. The Varaxi died by the millions, not in battle, but in confusion and terror. They were killed by enemies they could not see, could not fight, could not understand. On the Varaxi homeworld, the High Queen grew desperate. Her generals had no victories to report. Her admirals could not explain why their fleets were disappearing. Her scientists could not identify the weapons being used against them. She sent messages to the Galactic Concord, demanding help. She reminded them that the Varaxi were members now, entitled to the protection of all 900 species. She threatened, she pleaded. She offered concessions she never would have considered before. Ambassador Verthax responded to each message personally. His answer was always the same. "You are warned. The Concord will not interfere. This is between you and humanity." The High Queen threw the communicator across her throne room in rage. Her advisors cowered as she screamed at them, demanding solutions they could not provide. "How are they doing this?" she shrieked. "Where are their ships? Where's their fleet?" No one could answer her. The human 7th Fleet still sat at the edge of their space, visible and unmoving. It seemed like a small force, easily destroyed if the Varaxi committed their full strength against it. But every time the Varaxi tried to organize an attack, something went wrong. Ships lost power at critical moments. Navigation systems sent fleets into empty space. Weapons malfunctioned just before firing. The humans had not just built ghost ships. They had built ghost programs too, digital saboteurs that lived inside Varaxi computer networks. They watched everything, reported everything, and when necessary, they broke everything. Admiral Patricia Cole reviewed the progress reports from her office on Earth. The war was going exactly as planned. Human casualties were minimal. Varaxi casualties were catastrophic. In 3 months, they had lost 1/3 of their military and 1/6 of their total population. How much longer? Her aide asked. Patricia looked out the window at the peaceful blue sky of Earth. Somewhere out there, young men and women like Daniel Hayes were fighting a war that most humans would never know about. They were doing terrible things for the right reasons, killing millions so that billions could live in safety. "Soon," she said, "the Varaxi are almost broken. A few more weeks, and they will be ready for the final phase." And then, Patricia did not answer. The final phase was something she tried not to think about. It was necessary, she told herself. The Varaxi had killed 400,000 innocent people on New Montana. They had to be stopped permanently. But she knew that when it was over, she would carry the weight of it for the rest of her life. That was the price of command. That was the burden of being human. She turned back to her work, pushing the doubts aside. There would be time for guilt later. Right now, there was a war to win. 6 months had passed since the fall of New Montana. The Varaxi Dominion was dying. Half of their fleet was gone, destroyed by enemies they had never seen. 1/4 of their population was dead, killed by weapons they could not understand. Their colonies were being abandoned as terrified civilians fled toward the homeworld. Hoping that numbers would provide safety, the High Queen sat alone in her throne room. Staring at reports that grew worse every day, her advisors had stopped coming to see her. Her generals had nothing left to say. The great Vroxy Dominion, conquerors of 40 star systems, had been brought to its knees by a species they had dismissed as soft and weak. She knew what she had to do. She summoned her remaining military commanders to the throne room. When they arrived, she saw the fear in their compound eyes. They were waiting for her to surrender, to beg the humans for mercy. Instead, she gave them an order that would change everything. "We cannot win this war," she said, her voice cold and hard. "The humans fight in ways we cannot counter. Their weapons are invisible. Their ships are ghosts. But there is one thing we can still do." The commanders waited in silence. "Earth," the High Queen continued, "their homeworld. It is the heart of everything they are. If we destroy it, we destroy them. Even if we fall, we will take their most precious possession with us." One of her admirals stepped forward. "High Queen, we do not have the ships to break through their defenses. We have tried to attack their fleets and failed every time. We will not attack their fleets." The High Queen brought up a holographic map showing the route from Vraxi space to the Sol system. "We will send a suicide fleet. 300 ships, each carrying enough antimatter to crack a planet. They will jump directly to Earth and destroy it before the humans can respond." The commanders looked at each other. It was madness. It was also the only option they had left. "The crews will die," another general pointed out. "They will die as heroes. They will be remembered forever as the warriors who struck back at the monsters who destroyed us." The High Queen rose from her throne. "I want volunteers only. Ships crewed by those who understand they will not be coming back. Can you find them?" The general nodded slowly. "There are many who have lost families to the human weapons. They will volunteer." "Good. Make it happen. We launch in 2 days." The suicide fleet came together faster than anyone expected. 300 ships filled with Varaxi, who had nothing left to lose. They had watched their loved ones die. They had seen their civilization crumble. They wanted revenge, even if it cost them everything. 2 days later, the fleet launched. 300 vessels carrying 300 world-killing weapons, all pointed at the small blue planet called Earth. They jumped to hyperspace with cheers and battle songs. Ready to sacrifice themselves for the glory of the Dominion, they never arrived. On Earth, Admiral Patricia Cole received the notification while eating her lunch. She set down her fork and read the message twice before speaking. "They took the bait." "Yes, ma'am," her aide confirmed. "The entire suicide fleet entered the hyperspace corridor we prepared for them. They are currently trapped in a pocket dimension about 40 light years from any exit point." Patricia let out a long breath. This had been the most dangerous part of the plan. For months, human intelligence had been feeding false information to the Vroxy, making them believe that a direct strike on Earth was possible. They had left breadcrumbs pointing to a specific hyperspace route, a path that looked like it bypassed human defenses. In reality, that path led nowhere. Human scientists had learned to manipulate hyperspace in ways that other species thought impossible. They had created a trap, a dead-end dimension where ships could enter but never leave. 300 Varaxi warships were now floating in empty darkness, their crews slowly realizing that they had been tricked. Their engines would work. Their life support would function. But no matter how long they flew, they would never find a way out. "How long can we hold them there?" Patricia asked. "Indefinitely. The energy requirements are high, but sustainable." Patricia nodded. Part of her felt something like pity for those trapped crews. They would eventually run out of food, out of water, out of hope. They would die slowly in the void, never understanding what had happened to them. But then she remembered New Montana. She remembered Kyle Bennett and Lisa Park and 400,000 civilians who had done nothing wrong except live on a planet the Varaxi wanted. The pity faded. "Signal the 7th Fleet," she ordered. "Tell them it is time." The 7th Fleet had been waiting for this moment. 120 ships powered up their engines and began moving toward Vraxi space. But they were not alone. Across human territory, other ships were waking up. Vessels that had been hidden in asteroid fields, disguised as civilian transports, or simply floating dark and silent in the spaces between stars. Thousands of them, each one armed and ready for war. The Varaxi had thought the Seventh Fleet was humanity's main force. They were wrong. It was just the tip of the spear. The combined human fleet arrived at Vraxi Prime the next day. The alien homeworld was a large planet with brown and orange clouds, orbited by a dozen military stations and whatever ships the Varaxi had managed to gather for defense. Admiral Patricia Cole watched the planet grow larger on her view screen. This was the world that had ordered the attack on New Montana. The High Queen who lived there had called humans soft and weak. She had thought the Varaxi could take whatever they wanted without consequences. She was about to learn how wrong she was. "Open a channel to the surface," Patricia ordered. The High Queen appeared on screen. She looked older than she had 6 months ago, her shell dull and cracked with stress. But her eyes still burned with defiance. "Human," she said. "You have one. What terms do you offer?" "Terms?" Patricia's voice was flat, without emotion. "There are no terms. There is no surrender. There is only this. If you destroy us, you become monsters. You become everything you claim to hate." Patricia leaned forward in her chair. "Let me tell you something about humans, High Queen. We gave you a warning. We told you what would happen if you attacked us. You ignored that warning. You killed our people. 400,000 civilians who never threatened anyone. Farmers, teachers, children." The High Queen's mandibles clicked nervously. "That was war. Casualties happen in war." "No, that was murder. And we do not forgive murder." Patricia stood up, her eyes never leaving the screen. "We do not want to be monsters. We spent 200 years trying to prove that we could live in peace, but you would not let us. You forced us to remember what we really are. And what is that? Survivors." Patricia turned to her weapons officer. "Target the planet's core. Fire when ready." The High Queen screamed something, but the transmission was already cut. On the view screen, Patricia watched as hundreds of missiles launched from human ships. They streaked toward Vraxi Prime, punching through the atmosphere and diving deep into the planet's crust. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, the surface began to crack. Great fissures opened across continents. Magma erupted through the wounds in the planet's skin. The military stations in orbit tried to fire on the human fleet, but they were destroyed within seconds. The defensive ships scattered and ran, but there was nowhere to go. Varaxi Prime broke apart over the course of 2 hours. 3 billion lives ended in fire and destruction, their homeworld reduced to a field of burning rubble. The Varaxi Dominion, a civilization that had terrorized dozens of species across thousands of years, ceased to exist. Admiral Patricia Cole watched until it was over. Then she sat down heavily in her chair and closed her eyes. Around her, the bridge crew was silent. There would be no celebrations, no cheering. What they had done was necessary, but it was not something to be proud of. "Set course for home," Patricia said quietly. "The war is over." Human fleet turned away from the debris field and disappeared into hyperspace, leaving only silence behind. The Galactic Concord called an emergency. Meeting 3 days after the destruction of Vraxi Prime, representatives from all 900 member species attended, filling a great hall that had been built to hold discussions of trade agreements and territorial disputes. Today, the topic was different. Ambassador Verthex stood at the center of the chamber, looking older and more tired than he had in centuries. His tendrils hung limp against his face, barely glowing at all. Around him, the representatives of countless civilizations sat in stunned silence. "The Varaxi Dominion is gone," he announced, though everyone already knew this. Not defeated. Not conquered. Gone. Their homeworld has been destroyed. Their colonies have been sterilized. Their fleet exists only as debris floating in empty space. In 6 months, humanity has erased a spacefaring civilization that took thousands of years to build. The chamber erupted into noise. Species that had spent millennia believing they were the most powerful beings in the galaxy were suddenly confronted with a terrifying truth. There was something far more dangerous than any of them had imagined, and it lived just beyond the quarantine boundary. "How many ships did the humans lose?" demanded a representative from the Kaleri Federation. His voice was high with fear. 47, Vertex replied. Humanity lost 47 vessels in the entire campaign. The Viraxi lost over 8,000. More shouting. More panic. A few representatives began demanding that the Concord take action, that they form a coalition to stop humanity before it was too late. Berthex waited for the noise to die down before continuing. "I understand your fear. I share it. But I must remind this assembly of certain facts." He paused to look around the room. Humanity respected the quarantine for 200 cycles. They stayed within their boundaries. They traded peacefully with those species willing to deal with them. They asked for nothing, except to be left alone. And now they have committed genocide, someone shouted from the back of the hall. They responded to genocide with genocide, Verthex corrected. The Viraxi attacked a peaceful colony without provocation. They killed 400,000 civilian humans. They intended to enslave or destroy every human in existence. His tendrils flashed with a hint of their old intensity. What did you expect humanity to do? Thank them. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. The humans had a choice, Verthex continued. They could have accepted defeat. They could have surrendered their territory and submitted to Viraxi rule. They could have acted like sensible, rational beings who understood when they were outmatched. He shook his head slowly. But that is not what humans do. When you push them, they push back. When you hurt them, they hurt you worse. When you try to destroy them, they destroy you first. He brought up a holographic display showing the quarantine boundary around human space. The Concord created this boundary because we recognized a simple truth. Humans are not like us. They do not think like us. They do not fight like us. They are something different. Something that evolved on a world so dangerous that they learned to survive by being more dangerous than anything around them, and we should destroy them now. While we still can, suggested a Viraxa-like species called the Kathrani, before they grow stronger. With what? Verthex asked mildly. How many ships do you think the Concord could send against them? 100,000? 1,000,000? Do you think that would be enough? No one answered. The humans spent 200 years behind that boundary. They knew we were watching them. They knew we feared them. And they used that time to prepare for exactly this situation. Verthex turned off the display. They have weapons we have never seen. Ships that our sensors cannot detect. Technologies that our scientists cannot explain. They showed us only a fraction of their power, just enough to destroy the Viraxi. What they are hiding is almost certainly much worse. The assembly sat in horrified contemplation. My recommendation is simple, Verthex concluded. Respect the boundary. Do not provoke them. Do not give them a reason to view the Concord as a threat. Let them return to their quiet existence behind the quarantine line. And pray to whatever gods you worship that they choose to stay there. The meeting ended without any formal resolution. Species that had considered themselves masters of the galaxy left the chamber quietly. Many of them already planning to move their populations farther from human space. Within a decade, the quarantine boundary was expanded 3 times. Not because the Concord demanded it, but because other species requested it. They wanted more distance between themselves and the creatures who had erased an empire in 6 months. On Earth, life slowly returned to normal. Admiral Patricia Cole retired 6 months after the war ended. She moved to a small farm in the mountains of Montana, a deliberate choice she never explained to anyone. She lived there quietly for another 20 years, watching the seasons change and trying not to think about Viraxi Prime. She died in her sleep at 84, surrounded by family. Her final words, according to her granddaughter, were a simple request. Tell them to remember. Always remember, Captain Daniel Hayes left the military entirely. He changed his name, moved to a quiet moon at the edge of human territory, and never spoke of his service again. Sometimes, late at night, he would go outside and look up at the stars. He would wonder how many Vroxy had died without ever knowing what killed them. He would wonder if what he had done was right. He never found an answer. The ghost ships were decommissioned and destroyed. The biological weapons were sealed in vaults deep beneath mountains on worlds with no names. The technologies that had won the war were classified so heavily that their very existence became a rumor. A nightmare whispered by those with high enough security clearances to suspect the truth. But the weapons were not forgotten. Somewhere in the darkness, in hidden facilities on secret worlds, scientists continued their work. They developed new tools, new methods, new ways to protect humanity from any threat that might arise, because humans understood something that other species did not. The galaxy was not a safe place. There would always be someone who wanted what you had. There would always be someone who thought you were weak. There would always be someone who ignored the warnings. And when that someone came, humanity would be ready in the centuries that followed. The story of the Vroxy Dominion became a lesson taught in every alien military academy. Instructors would show their students the records of the war, the footage of Vroxy Prime breaking apart, the empty space where a proud civilization had once stood. The lesson was always the same. Do not provoke the humans. Do not harm their people. Do not ignore their warnings, because they remember they're dead. They never forgive. And they never, ever forget. Far away, behind the quarantine boundary, humanity continued to exist. They built cities and raised families. They created art and music and stories. They lived their lives in peace, asking nothing from the galaxy except to be left alone. But in every human heart, there was a small piece of something dark. A willingness to do terrible things to protect the ones they loved. A capacity for violence that had been shaped by millions of years of evolution on a planet that tried to kill them every day. They hoped they would never have to use it again. But if someone else ignored the warnings, if someone else decided that humans were too soft or too weak or too peaceful to fight back, they would learn the same lesson the Vroxy had. Learned some species are not meant to be provoked. Some warnings are not meant to be ignored, and some prices are too high to pay. The galaxy watched the quiet space, beyond the quarantine boundary, and remembered, and in the silence between the stars, humanity waited, hoping for peace but prepared for war. Always prepared, always waiting, always ready to remind the universe W.